Okay, this video is about a guy from the late 1800s named Ernst Worrell Keely. It's been said that if Tesla was 100 years ahead of his time, Keely was 1,000 years ahead of his time. He built these like fantastic, crazy machines, and I'll show them throughout the video. But I was thinking that this guy's like research, if you ever look into him, is like the key to everything. It ties everything together. How everyone in like the truther community is like all on the cusp of figuring out what this Keely guy does. And his name is freaking Ernst Worrell Keely. Worrell Keely. World Key. His name is literally World Key. And he was famous for making these devices that had like unlimited energy machines, where they can produce near infinite force. And they were a lot of them were shaped like as a sphere, and it would have a sphere inside of the sphere, slightly smaller, and then another sphere inside of that sphere, slightly smaller. And then they would, from what I understand, they would move according to something called sympathetic vibration physics. That's what he called it. He called it sympathetic physics, sympathetic vibration. The sympathetic vibration is like how everything in the universe interacts through the ether. All of his devices are based on tuning resonance. The one device he made was called the compound disintegrator, and it was based on a tuning device. It was a unique tuning device that he would place onto like a rock, like a specific rock type, like quartz or something, and it would resonate with that. And then he would lock that into the compound disintegrator, and then put it up to a huge rock of quartz, and it would match the resonance of that rock of quartz. And then he would slowly move the resonance, because they were matched up. It's kind of like when you hear about the bridges.
Tacoma Bridge, Washington, opened only a few months ago, was built at a cost of over $6 million. But misfortune overtakes the great structure. These are some of the most amazing pictures ever recorded by a newsreel. The actual collapse of the world's third largest suspension bridge. Only a 35-mile-an-hour wind is blowing, but this apparently sets up a rhythmic swinging of the bridge, which increases with each swing. Finally, the swinging road and the suspension cables give way and plunge into the water below. Fortunately, the only casualties were a car stalled on the bridge and a dog.
Because someone would match the resonance with like a metronome or something, and it would collapse the bridge. That's what he does with the rock, because he gets the resonance of the rock from the tuning device. And then he would slowly manipulate it, and the rock would turn to dust. And he did this apparently for a bunch of, the book I read this from said he did this for a group calling themselves the Syndicate. And they were a bunch of millionaires back in the early 1900s, or late 1800s. And there's evidence of this. These people bought a bunch of gold mines throughout the entire U.S. because, according to the story, that they hired Ernst Worrell Keely to come to a mine, a quarry in Pennsylvania, and use this device on a quartz quarry to drill a hole into the quarry wall, and so that only the gold will remain. So he matched it to the granite, and according to the story, he said give it like 18 minutes, and like 18 minutes later there was an 18-foot with a like a foot diameter. I don't know what the diameter of the hole was, I forget, but it was like an 18 foot deep hole into the side of the bedrock, and all that sat there was gold nuggets, because all the granite just turned to dust because of the resonance that he had it set at. And gold has a different resonance, so it didn't get affected by it, a different frequency. And then all the people, the book calls them the Syndicate, which is a really interesting name. But they bought up all the gold mines in like in a bunch of parts of the U.S. And then the stock, like all these stock market people that were like speculating, thought that they like knew something, so they all got like dived in on it, and it ended up causing like a small market crash because all these people didn't. They thought that these people buying the gold mines were just going to sell these gold mines, or something like that. Anyway, it caused like a small market crash. And the name of the book is called Universal Laws Never Before Revealed, Keely's Secrets. Understanding and Using the Science of Sympathetic Vibration by Dale Pond. He's the guy who figured out a lot of this Keely stuff. But he started getting into it because of this device that he found made that was just sitting in the Franklin Institute, or I think it was the Franklin Institute, and it was just like this weird looking device, and they said it was from this guy Ernst Worrell Keely, and it's like a copper. I'll show it on the screen, but so Dale Pond got it, and they decided to try to analyze no one knew what the device actually did. So they get the device, and they figured out that it takes water to go into it. And they said once they connected a water hose to it, the thing like almost came alive. That's what they said. And they said the device was a perpetual motion machine. And before people freak out, because I've looked for free energy devices for years. That was like the first thing that got me into going down the rabbit holes, was free energy devices. And I never really found one that actually seemed legit. And then I ended up just like giving up on it because I found out that farmers and homesteaders and hillbillies and mountain men have been using like water wheels and shit to power their houses for centuries. So it's like free energy is not really even needed. But this dude is the only evidence I found that actually seems legit. And it's legit because everyone says you can't do over unity, but there are actually 4 different ways recognized by modern science, not that that matters, but 4 different ways recognized by modern science where over unity occurs. The first one is a water hammer. I have a faucet down in my basement that like when you turn it on, you can like feel the water hammer. It like shakes the pipes. That provides like a massive over unity of force. So if you could harness that, you could get over unity. And then another one is called anti-Stokes emission fluoroscopy. And it has something to do with light waves. I don't really know much about it, but it's been recognized as one of a method for over unity when these certain specific conditions happen. The way I would explain it is like, if you've ever been on a trampoline, you know the concept of double jumping someone? You jump at a certain time after their jump, and it launches them way higher into the air. Well, after a while, you can start doing this like consciously. Like that, it's not that hard. You can affect their jump 2 other ways too. I had a trampoline when I was a kid. So the other 2 ways would be you could stop their jump, where you jump. It's like slightly different than the double jump. And then the third way is to steal their jump, where it gives you the double jump. And then you go in the air twice as high. So it's effectively doubling what the original impact is, because you just happen to move near the wave at a certain period. So I think that's what a lot of these concepts, these over unity concepts, are based on. Kind of like riding a wave in the ocean. If you miss it just by a little bit, then you don't catch the wave. But if you can feel it when you match up with the wave.
Over 110 miles per hour. The storm reached land about 3 hours ago, and what? Wait a minute. There's a person surfing a huge wave. A person was.
There's a third way that they recognized. It's called spherical sound wave attraction. And it has something to do with the way spheres interact with sound waves. when they're directed inward of the sphere. Like when a metallic sphere is hit from sound waves from all different angles, like a spherical angle, I don't know. But that also has that same kind of wave, like catching the wave over unity. And then the last method is vapor cavitation, like an implosion. Vapor cavitation it's kind of like the water hammer, but without the water. It's a cavity explosion, a vacuum that causes not an explosion, an implosion, and this can cause overunity. Well, this dude John Worrell Keely in the 1800s, this device that he made, and it was in the Franklin Institute for years, can do 3 or 4 of these all at once. 3 or 4 of these overunity things. It has a water hammer, it has vapor cavitation, utilizes it so well that it makes microwave frequencies with water, without electricity or anything.
If any of your engineers and you look at this thing, you say, it is absolutely bizarre. There's no way this thing can work. Because in conventional male-oriented physics, where we put in energy, we got to hit it with something, This makes no sense because it doesn't operate with that philosophy. It operates with the female forces of implosion. So the thing kind of operates backwards. And when you look at it a little bit and you say, well, this thing operates backwards, and then all of a sudden your mind just gets all clouded and confused because you're not used to thinking in those terms. But after a while, it gets kind of simple. And this is brilliant. If Keely did anything, he was a brilliant machinist and a brilliant mechanic. He just had a cleverness of making things. Water would come in through this orifice. Once he got the thing primed with water in the system, he could just kind of give this thing a little crank, and it would create a vacuum, and the water would draw itself through the machine. Now, one interesting concept is the water formed a part of the mechanism. That's not normal physics. That's not normal engineering. We don't normally do that, where the water is actually part of the motion of the machine. So this thing is kind of like a holistic machine. It's not a machine operating on the water or the water operating on the machine. It's the water and the machine operating together as a whole unit. It's kind of like the human body does. So I give this thing a crank. Water will come into here above this level of this tube, this horizontal tube that goes across the front. The tube goes through this pulsating chamber. I call this a pulsating chamber. And the tubes are hollow. There's nothing inside of them. The same thing with this tube. It's just a straight tube. There are holes in the center so that it has access to the internal volume of this pulsating chamber. This chamber is 1/64th of an inch in thickness. It is red brass. It's very hard, very resonant type brass, whereas this is a yellow brass. This is red brass, kind of like a naval brass. And the interesting thing is, once the water came into this and started through the system, this chamber would begin to pulsate. And because it's mostly got air in it, we would have a pulsation of a high and low pressure forming at intervals, very high frequency. So this becomes a pump. Once the water is in motion, this pulsating chamber becomes a pump with no moving parts. It's really ingenious. Just a year ago, I ran across a NASA paper where these guys, some engineer didn't even have his name on the paper, had designed a waveguide using a transducer, and he had developed a pump using a transducer, there again with no moving parts. So here was a validation from NASA that this concept works. And I thought that was really good that we ran into that paper. In these two mechanisms, one on each side, these are check valves. The water would come across horizontally and start up through this check valve, and all it is a round ball sitting on a round hole. So water could come this way, but it can't go back down. Then the water would come through these pipes around here, there's 2 on each side, into these pistons. Now, there's 2 kinds of pistons. This is kind of an enigma why there's 2 distinct designs on these pistons. They are not the same. And this left side, your right side, we have what we consider a standard piston arrangement. Underneath, we have a bar that goes underneath that pushes a piston up into this larger chamber. The water would come into the top of that cylinder, on top of that piston. And in the end, there's a valve that goes straight through here. It's a rotary valve, so it just rotates. In this case, it just rocks back and forth. So the water would come through that cylinder. When the valve got in the right place, the water would shoot through into this cylinder, pushing this crankshaft and causing it to rotate. It's real simple. However, the things that go on while it's doing all of that is really neat. The pulsations would drive the water past the check valves into this cylinder down here, pushing this rod down, which lifted this weight on the far side here. So it would lift this weight on the far side, thereby putting pressure on this water in this cylinder. So here we've got water under tremendous pressure because the injections of the pulsating waves pounding that water. The minute the little rocker arm rocked the valve back and forth, we've got a high velocity stream of water coming past the valve. So when you close the valve on high velocity water, what do? You get a water hammer. You get that pounding. And water hammer is when you close the faucet in your sink and the pipes bang in your basement. That's water hammer. There's infinite pressure in that. So that pressure, I did a computer model of what happens in here. And of course, the computer model is based on ideal conditions, which this isn't. But I was surprised that it showed within 8 cycles of this valve opening and closing, the pressure goes to infinity. Now that's an ideal situation, which this isn't. So we got the high speed stream of water coming through the valve system, pushing this piston up, and would cause a little bit of rotation. And on the other side, there's 2 types of water hammer, by the way. There's upstream and downstream. Water coming into a valve. You shut the valve, that water has a momentum that keeps going against the valve. And the reverberation of this shock wave going back upstream, away from the valve, creates a pocket of negative pressure, low pressure, vacuum, which will collapse as you impose, causing a pounding. On the downstream side, the water wants to keep going, so it creates another vacuum, which collapses and causes another shock wave. So if we time that shock wave back and forth on either side of the valve, it goes upstream up the pipe, and it comes back down. If you open the valve at the same time that reverberation of the shock wave comes back, it will add to the original one. It's like a child on a swing. You push a child on a swing. If you push it at the right moment, it'll get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And by the way, that is the same principle that Morey used in his valve assemblies in the 1930s and 40s, where he caused an oscillation of electrical current. It's much like Bearden talks about today with scalar electromagnetics, where they got bifilar coils and they got this tremendous charge of current, not current, but potential that they oscillate back and forth. So we've created a potential in here, and we oscillate it back and forth, and the valve lets loose just enough to keep the mechanism going. On the other side, there is a slightly different, well, it's fundamentally different thing happening. Because this piston down here does not capture water. It is a round ball sitting in a round hole. So when the water squirts through here, it hits on top of this ball and then goes immediately all over the place. But while it does that, it creates a vaporized situation on top of that sphere, and it polarizes the water. Right above the round portion, we have a little chamber in here. It's a little square chamber, and that bothered me for 2 years, what this chamber was all about. Because it's a rectangular hole going through this little chamber. That when the ball closes, it closes one end of it, and when the valve closes, the other end of it's closed. And I got to thinking about waveguides and whatnot. This thing is a waveguide. When both the valve and the piston are open, we have a certain fundamental frequency. When one or the other closes, the frequency goes up nearly 4 times. And I think that's in my paper. When that happens, based on the dimensions of this waveguide, we have microwave frequencies in operation on this water vapor. Microwave frequencies from a mechanical mechanism. It's absolutely incredible. So we get the water vapor in here and what happens when you microwave water? So we get a high potential expansion rate of the water going through this valve and driving this piston. So we've got 2 different drive mechanisms working on this little motor. So the guy was a genius. There's no doubt about it. And this was the machine he gave up on. He went on to better and more higher things that we're only now beginning to get any kind of idea about.
The Dale Pond guy that explains it, the part that I found so fascinating was that he was like, the reason nobody could ever figure out this machine is because men are like symmetrical. We like our machines to be symmetrical, right? Where like an engine has its 2 pistons. They both move, do the same thing, right? But his machine didn't have that. It was off center, purposely. And it was like, and Dale Pond, he explains it like, it's he added the female to the machine. He formed it with the female and the male and made it as one. So it's ordered chaos, basically. And that's how the machine, he said when they turned it on, it looked like it came alive. And apparently, Keely later figured out how to do it without water, without using the water hammer and just using vapor cavitation. With these, the amount of over-unity you can get from vapor cavitation is like, it's not measurable. Like it's almost an infinite. Well, some of the tests that he would do, I think one of them was like he tried to measure the force with like some kind of weight mechanism and a leverage, and he couldn't find enough materials to properly measure it, because the amount of force that he could produce was so high that he couldn't measure how much force the thing could make. That's how powerful it was. And then this guy Keely apparently got to a point where he could make his devices only run for himself based on his own resonant frequency. So if it wasn't his resonant frequency running the device or pressing the button to start the device, it wouldn't start. And I think that would actually be possible, because we all have heart waves, we all have brain waves, and if he had a tuning device. I'll show it on the screen. It's very unique looking, and that's how it would how he would get the resonant frequency of anything. That's why he called it the compound disintegrator, because it can disintegrate any compound, anything. And I think this is why was never mentioned. Tesla was authorized. Some of his stuff wasn't, I guess. I don't even know if he existed, but I'm sure he did. Maybe he did. Some of his stuff was authorized, like AC electricity. Yeah, Tesla, Edison, they were authorized inventors. The cabal allowed them to exist. Keely, he's an unauthorized inventor. They never let any of his stuff get big, because the amount of responsibility you would need to use his machines is like crazy. Because you could destroy like massive amounts of stuff with this, or you could affect the world crazily. The power was too much for any human that wasn't spiritually aware to utilize. And I think that we're at the stage where truthers, quote unquote, are at that level where we are spiritually aware enough to handle this information. And let's see, what else did he do? He believed everything was based on music, sympathetic vibration. Everything was vibrations through the ether. Now, some of this stuff I don't really understand, because I'm musically retarded. I need to learn an instrument or something. It looks exactly like the video I made before. I made a video called Base Number Systems 2 through 99. And I showed all the base number systems from 2 through 99, the patterns within them. His model for the atom looks almost identical to that. For each, it's all based on whatever base number you're using. The patterns are different for each base number, and I'll show it on the screen. The only difference was his starts from the middle. His 1 is in the middle. Mine is not. Mine started from the top. The 1 was at the top. But if you reverse that, if I just put the 1 into the middle, then it changes the patterns, and they would all probably look like his. Yeah, I think he's the key to everything. He's the world key. He's Ernst Worrell Keely. Hope you enjoyed the video.